That was a proper FA Cup tie. Not polished, not controlled, not comfortable, but full of heart, full of chaos. And that's exactly what this competition is all about. And that's why we love it. Um, and there was one tactical problem Mansfield created in that game that Arsenal struggled with for long spells. We'll come back to that in a minute because once you see it, the whole flow of the match starts to make a lot more sense. Welcome to the Gooner Pavilion, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not, we thank you and appreciate you for always coming back. Mansfield made Arsenal feel this one, no question about it. They scrapped, they pressed, and they tackled, and they played with a level of heart that you only get in the FA Cup. And Arsenal, we had to grow into it. We had to suffer, we had to adjust, and in the end, we had to rely on two moments of quality to settle this game. This was a cup tie. And when you step back and look at the match, it really came down to one tactical battle. From the whistle, Mansfield flooded the central areas. Every time Arsenal tried to build through the middle, there were bodies everywhere. Now, if you look at this passing network with me for a moment, just focus on the center of the pitch. See how everything is crowded into that one zone? This passing network from Opta analysts shows exactly what was happening in that first half. That Mansfield's closing the middle of the pitch, and Arsenal kept trying to play through it. We're forcing combinations that weren't really there. And the deeper insight here is that Mansfield weren't trying to dominate possession. They were trying to make Arsenal uncomfortable in the most important area of the pitch, because Arsenal lineup showed, which was a very interesting lineup, so to speak, where it almost felt like we had so many attacking wingers in the pitch. But the moment we started going wide, the moment we stretched them, the middle finally opened up. And that's where goals came from in this game. And once you notice that shift, the rest of the match begins to make a lot of sense. And actually, when you step back and watch the match again, this adjustment might have been the most important moment of the night. Because if Arsenal had kept forcing the center, Mansfield would have stayed comfortable. Once that width came in, the match tilted. And when that happened, certain players started to take control. And that's often what happens in cup ties. The tactical solution unlocks the individual performances. And I know it took an injury to Trossard for that tactical shift to happen, but Mikel Arteta recognized what was happening with what he went with initially and made an adjustment with Nkapia coming in. Now, the Mansfield goal came from pressure in that same area. Now, take a look at this pressure map. Just look at the central pocket, right? See how many defensive actions are happening right there. This graphic from Opta analysts shows just how aggressively Mansfield were pressing that zone. And eventually, that pressure forced the mistake. And look, listen, young Salmon is 16. 16. He did a lot of good things in the game, but moments like that are part of the learning curve. As far as I'm concerned, I thought it was experience, in a hostile ground. And a deeper point is that Mansfield were creating mistakes through pressure. And that's just classic FA Cup football, right? And speaking of 16-year-old guys, Max Dowman, oh my goodness. Take a look at this heat map for a moment. Notice how he stretches across both halves of the pitch. This one from SofaScore just shows how involved he was. And that tells you something important. He wasn't hiding from the ball. He was demanding it. And the deeper layer here is that players his age normally play safe. Dowman didn't. He played brave football. Mansfield really gave everything in this game. Arsenal just found enough, and that's the story. And when you look at the match tactically, it really comes back to the central congestion we talked about earlier. Once Arsenal stretched the pitch, certain players began to take control. Now let's talk about three things Arsenal did really well. First, the young players. Nights like this can swallow academy players. Dowman handled it beautifully. And Salmon, mistake aside, showed real personality. These are big minutes in a hostile environment. And that heat map from SofaScore shows how brave Dowman was. He kept showing for the ball, and that willingness to demand possession allowed Arsenal to keep progressing the play. And the deeper takeaway is that those minutes are how academy players grow into senior football. Now, the second thing Arsenal did well was the adjustment. Early in the match, the center was completely blocked. Now, look at this shot map. Focus on the center of the box. See how many attempts are blocked in that crowded area. The shot map from Opta Analysis just shows how congested that space was. The congestion is exactly what Mansfield wanted. But since Arsenal started attacking the wings, the entire defensive block began to stretch. And the width created so much space everywhere else. And that's when that game started to change. And the third thing, maybe the most important thing, when the game got chaotic, someone had to slow it down. And that someone was Christian Nogard. Look at his heat map for a moment. Just take a second to see how much ground he covers. This one from SofaScore is remarkable. It's like everywhere. That kind of presence allows Arsenal to control the rhythm of the game. And honestly, I want to see Norgard play a lot more, because every time he plays, and I know you can say that it's against inferior opposition, but every time he plays well. He rarely puts a step wrong. I just want to see him get more games, especially with all the games that we have to play for the end of the season and us struggling for bodies. Certainly, there are opportunities to rest Rice and Subimendi further down the line. Players like him rarely get the headlines, and he's probably not going to get talked about in this game, but they control the match. And it reminds me a little bit of Gilberto Silva when he was in Arsenal. Just used to be quietly just dictating things. Nobody really talked about him, but he was doing a huge amount. And that calm control is what allowed Arsenal to really control the chaos in this game. Okay, let's switch things a little bit. And as good as some of those moments were, there were still things Arsenal need to improve. Okay, so we put a lot of crosses in this game, and the stats show that they weren't really effective. We kept repeating the same kind of delivery. You can kind of add crosses with the corners that we took, and Mansfield were dealing with it comfortably. The one or two corners cost them a little bit of heartache, but none of that in total was really a threat. But I mean, it kind of shows to the wider narrative when people talk about Arsenal and set pieces. When you do have quality delivery, especially from the likes of Saka or the likes of Declan Rice, it really shows what Arsenal has here, that a lot of other teams are jealous and I must say envious, and hence why all this negative, media surrounding Arsenal and set pieces. Now, the second issue goes back to something we discussed earlier on. We're too stubborn in the first half, too determined to force the middle. And Mansfield were waiting for exactly that. And that stubbornness nearly cost Arsenal control of the game. Third point here, Jesus still building his rhythm. He was doing a bit of a disappearing act in this game. Sharpness wasn't really there. Listen, we're going to need a version of him as the competition gets more and more, but this this wasn't it. This was not the version of that we wanted. And actually, there's one more thing in that game that's easy to miss if you look at the scoreline. This wasn't just about tactics. This wasn't about maturity, because early in the game, Mansfield had the energy, they had the crowd, they had the momentum, but Arsenal didn't panic. They adjusted, they slowed the game down. And that's the difference between a team surviving a cup tie and a team learning how to win them. And that maturity might be the most encouraging thing Arsenal fans take from this game. Our ability to find ways to win the game. We just found a way to win. And that was so important, for us. And before we close, there's one thing Arsenal fans will be hoping isn't serious. Obviously, we saw Trossard going down, Calafiori, also picking up a knock as well. Hopefully, this is just precautionary issues, because Arsenal have already been managing a lot of injuries, and everything that we've built on the season up until now is going to be determined cruelly in a couple of weeks. We've got Champions League, we've got a League Cup final, and Arsenal need everybody to be able to get through. So listen, this was a cup tie in every sense of the word. Mansfield showed heart, they showed belief, and Arsenal had to dig deep. But when you step back and look at the match, it really comes down to one tactical shift. Mansfield closed that middle, and Arsenal eventually found the width. And that's what decided the tie, in my view. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. What worried you in this game? And how far can Arsenal go into this competition? We're still in all the competition right now, which is great, but it does come with elevated expectation. And now there's going to be a bit of urgency that will be added into what Arsenal does. And that's something we're going to look into in our next video. We'll be previewing the Champions League game against Bayer Leverkusen. So check out for that video, and also check out our previous videos, the preview for this game, as well as the post-game reaction from the Brighton game. Yeah, this feels like quite a ride, for Arsenal, and we're slowly getting there. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, guys, and stay blessed. I'll see you in the next one.